I've seen like in Eastern cultures more like mine. I think like there is this belief like children shouldn't have boundaries, which I don't agree with at all. We should teach like especially young people to have boundaries and like state what their needs are. Their parents should be more willing to listen to them and not react defensively.
Hello, and welcome to the Personal Development School podcast. I am so excited you're here. I am your co host, Thais Gibson, along with our new special host, Mike DeZio. This is a podcast that discusses everything related to integrated attachment theory, the new attachment theory, along with the subconscious mind, relationships, communication, needs, boundaries, and so much more. Throughout this podcast, you'll see a series of episodes I upload with new information, educational tips all about how to thrive in relationships and really master your emotional state in your life, along with special guests hosted by Mike DeZio to discuss all of these amazing topics in some longer form content. Thank you so much for being here, and I really hope you enjoy this episode.
My guest today is a counseling psychologist in training and an integrated attachment theory coach. Apart from the IAT training, she has done her MSc in clinical psychology and has diplomas in counseling psychology and also child psychology. She has been in the personal development school for more than 3 years and has shifted her attachment style from dismissive avoidant to secure. She has a passion for helping people heal and grow in order to live their lives in the best way possible. Podcast viewers and listeners, please welcome my guest, Sanjana Kumar. Hi, Sanjana. How are you doing today?
Hi, Mike. How are you? I'm fine.
Good. I'm well, thank you. So for everyone who doesn't know, Sanjana is a PDS celebrity. She's a legend. She's been in the school over 3 years, and I think you've been to like every single webinar.
Oh,
And
yeah.
a lot of the routines that I host, I always see you there. And the YouTube channel, I know you watch a lot of the YouTube channels every day. So this is probably one of our most dedicated students that we have, and it's really an honor to interview you today.
I'm
Okay.
happy to be here, Mike.
Oh, great, great. Okay, so Sanjana, just to start with, do you want to tell us briefly about your background and maybe a bit of your backstory, family life growing up, basically what's brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I was previously a dismissive avoidant, and I'm like pretty secure now since I've been in PDS since a very long time. It's more than I guess 3 years. So actually, like if I talk about my past, it pretty much had some elements of the emotional neglect was the main theme in my childhood, which is sort of like very common for DAs, I suppose. And there was also like volatility in my environment growing up. And there were instances of bullying, especially in my childhood. So because of that, I don't get a lot of healthy modeling of what relationships look like growing up, and that kind of like contributed to my attachment style. And then I had like a fear of intimacy. I was afraid to be vulnerable and all of that stuff. And that kind of like led me to develop a DA attachment style.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. So then in your own life, was there sort of a moment, like a catalyst, a realization? Was there an impactful event, like something that happened that really pushed you to dive into healing your attachment style?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say like I used to be very much interested in psychology. Like DAs have a high need for learning, so I always used to be very much interested in learning about psychology. I used to read books, watch YouTube, and all of that. So I was just watching a video on YouTube which was about attachment style. And then I started like learning about all the attachment styles, and I could quickly identify with dismissive avoidant. So that's when I kind of like got interested in learning about attachment theory. And I was like, wow, this thing actually like describes me pretty well. And then later on, I started discovering more videos on YouTube related to attachment theory. And then I came across Theis's channel, which was like a great blessing for me because before that I had like seen certain YouTube videos that were kind of like harsh towards this attachment style and all of that stuff. So I really loved the compassionate approach that Thais provided, and that's what kind of like attracted to me to her channel initially. And then I started watching more and more videos of hers, and then I started learning more about attachment theory, and then finally I decided to join the school. So it was just a random decision. Like in my life during that time, nothing was like sort of like a rock bottom or anything, but it was more like I was kind of like dissatisfied in my career area. So I think I was feeling a little bit stagnant. I had like finished my studies, I was doing a job, and then I was feeling like I was kind of like stuck and I'm not getting anywhere. And later on, I discovered that I had chosen a career which was wrong for me. So I was working as an auditor, and then after I worked on my attachment style, I actually like decided to do this career change to become a psychologist because I realized that's what I'm interested in. Yeah, so that was like really interesting for me.
Definitely. So your career as an auditor, did you find was that meeting a lot of your needs, or you just thought, hey, this is a pretty good job and I can make a pretty good career out of this, but it not meeting needs?
Yeah, that's actually the main reason why I was feeling so stuck. It was like meeting needs. So the thing was, my environment was fine. Like the job is something I wasn't like interested in. It wasn't meeting my needs. It wasn't something I wanted to do in the long term. And I was kind of like, even though they were like environment was fine, even though work hours were long, but my colleagues were very good, supervisors were very good. There's no problem in work environment. And still I was like dissatisfied. So I was like sort of wondering like why is this happening? But later on I discovered what was the reason for that.
For sure. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, definitely. I can attest to that. Some jobs, you have such amazing coworkers. You're like, oh, I'm just gonna stick
Hmm.
this out. But the actual job itself, you're like, oh, this isn't really kind of fulfilling me. This isn't making me, feel good by the end of the day. Um, but yeah, I'm happy that you sort of found that different path that's more in line with what you're interested in and what you like. Okay, so what made you join personal development school? Like, I know you saw the videos that kind of attracted you to the school. Do you want to walk us through what's your healing journey been like at the personal development school?
Yeah, so mainly what attracted me to BDS was the compassionate approach towards DAs that Thais has, and whatever she used to explain, it used to be like bang on. I used to have these moments like, wow, she is so accurate with the content. It's like she knows me like pretty well. So for sure, she is going to have like tools that are going to help me transform. So I just like joined PDS, and initially I was like a little bit hesitant, like, is it going to work out? Will this be fine? How is this going to go? I had like a lot of those limiting beliefs, I would say. But as soon as I joined, I even remember the first webinar I did with Thais that was on emotional anorexia, which
Okay.
was kind of like interesting.
Do you want
And
to
then
explain
I
that
was
to
just
our, do you want to explain that to our viewers if people haven't heard of the term emotional anorexia?
So, emotional anorexia is like the state usually most commonly seen in dismissive avoidance. And so the range of emotions is kind of like restricted, and the depth of emotions is not there. So, they are not in touch with their emotions. Their emotions are like sort of repressed. So, they are not in touch with, and they cannot like easily identify what their emotions are. And that kind of like on a surface level, they might look it's fine. But one of the things is if you repress your emotions, you can't experience positive emotions also deeply. So that's where the problem usually comes.
Right, right.
So that was something which was kind of like interesting. And I was kind of like asking Thais about, okay, I feel emotionally numb all the time. So she was like, okay, try and do some exercises where you challenge that belief, like what are the like emotions are not necessarily a negative thing. So what are the benefits of emotions? And then I started doing that. And during that time, I was also doing somatic work. So Thais had said like you need to connect your emotions to your body. So that's something that was like really helpful for me. And that's what I was trying to do. But I used to not identify at all. I'm like, I'm trying this exercise. I can't do it. I don't feel anything in my body. So I started doing that. After I started finding the benefits of emotions, then slowly I could feel the emotions. But whenever I tried to find sensations in my body, it used to be like outside my body. It was like I couldn't feel it inside. It was kind of like a dissociated way. I can like visualize it, but I feel it's sort of like something happening outside my body, which is going to sort of like sound strange. But then I asked Ice again, like, this is what is happening. She's saying you're not feeling safe feeling your feelings. So now I do the reprogramming work around it's safe to feel my feelings. And then I did that.
I love that. That's such an
So,
important point to you have to almost like prove to yourself that it's safe to feel your feelings and why emoting is good, why feeling your emotions is positive. Because if we don't have that, we're just going to be in protection mode, right? And it's going to be a lot harder to sort
mhm,
of let go. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I want to touch on something that you mentioned before I forget how Tice uses the compassionate approach.
mhm,
For all attachment styles, but definitely for DAs, because DAs have like, defective wounds and criticism can be quite hurtful. And I know probably if anybody's ever been on like the comments of YouTube or Facebook or Instagram on our account or any other account, people can go pretty hard at DAs. Um, and I just want to say, anybody who's interested in joining the school, like it's not no one would ever be saying those types of things. On the internet, it's one thing. People are just angry. When you're in pain, sometimes you're needing to sort of let it out. But in the school, we obviously treat everybody with respect and make sure you're comfortable. And the compassionate approach we know works best. Like if you shame someone or just tell someone what to do, it's kind of like your parents when you were young, just trying to tell you what to do, even if you didn't agree with it. But compassion definitely works 100 times better than sort of shaming or making people feel bad enough for the things that are, out of their control. And it was a result of their childhood. So I'm glad you brought that up about the compassionate approach, and that makes sense why you'd be sort of attracted to come to the school because of that. Um,
oh,
so
yes.
yeah, go ahead. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, definitely. That is something that kind of like attracted me. And PDS is one of the places where I feel the most safe. Even the PDS members group is like the only group on social media where I feel like 100% safe. So
Right.
thanks for bringing that up, Mike.
How do you deal with the comments? Because like I said, I know you're in the YouTube videos every day. I know you comment all the time. When you see comments negative towards a DA, how does that sort of make you feel, or how do you manage reading those comments?
Initially, when I used to have those comments, some of them used to be like directed at me. At times, I've like seen that on some other platforms, at times in YouTube or on other social media platforms. Initially, I used to get like a little bit affected, but right now I've gotten like much better at it. I think what helps me is like understanding the perspective of the other person. Maybe they are in pain. No one would sort of like say those things unless they are in pain themselves. So that is something that kind of like helped me like understanding their perspective and at the same time like having my own boundaries. I try like okay, I might not engage in something if it's like very mean or something.
Sure.
In the past, there have been certain times like if the person is being critical, I kind of like use the communication scripts at times in PDS. I'll respond to them in a kind manner and try to explain my point, and sometimes they do understand it. There have been certain times.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
that's what I do, and I can like another thing I've learned is not to personalize it. So whatever is happening doesn't have anything to do with me necessarily.
Totally. And like Tice gives the example of the purple elephant all the time. Like if somebody calls you a purple elephant, you'd be like, sure, like it wouldn't bother you, right? But if somebody's saying a comment and say you're a terrible person, you're awful, what's wrong with you? If you believe those things about yourself, it's really going to hurt. But if you work on your core wounds of like defectiveness, of, I'm not a bad person, those types of things, then these types of comments, like you said, you depersonalize them, you kind of see them for what they are. Like it's a lot of times other people's pain.
Mhm.
But just know, we all have work to do. We're all here trying to heal. So I'm not gonna, make excuses for people's unhealthy behaviors in relationships because I'm sure we've all kind of done some of
Mhm.
these things. But I just want to make the point of compassion definitely goes a long way. Um, I'm sure you can agree with that. So,
Oh,
Sanjana, you've put in a lot of hard work to become secure. But what were some of the most challenging or the hardest things about being dismissive avoidant when you were sort of in your most DA state?
the most challenging thing I would say is number one is like the amount of judgment I had towards my feelings. Like, I cannot have a negative feeling without being extremely judgmental or harsh on myself when I was a dismissive avoidant. Like, what is happening? I'm being like weak or too sensitive and all of that stuff. And I used to be very critical during that time. That was like the hardest things to be a DA. And apart from that, I would say like I had trouble reading people's non-verbal cues. That was sort of like challenging. And as soon as I could get in touch with my feelings, that was one of the changes I'd seen. Like I could read people better. I could pick up on non-verbal cues much better.
Wow, that's amazing. So yeah, you didn't have the language of these cues yourself, so it was hard to see them, but once you adopted them, learned them and understood them, then they're right there. They're obvious, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Wow, that's really beautiful. Um, so what is the best thing or best things that have happened to you since you've done work to become secure?
I would say the best thing would be like, firstly, the career change. So, like, I went back to school and then I got my degree in clinical psychology. And then after I completed, I was like glad. I was like so happy about it. So, that was like one of the most positive things that came out of being secure. And another thing is you feel definitely 10 times more fulfilled as compared to what you were when you were a dismissive avoidant. Like these have this belief, like they have this feeling like if they become secure, will it be better than being a DA or being emotionally numbed out? That is one of the things like a lot of DA kind of like deal with, but being secure definitely makes you feel more fulfilled emotionally.
Wow, okay. That's inspirational. So we know you've been a member of PDS for quite a while now. What's your favorite tool or teaching that you find's helped you the most? And what do you think is an important area for DAs to focus on specifically for their healing?
Okay, so for me, I would say two tools like really helped me out. First is the somatic work, and now in PDS we have a course on somatic work separately. When I joined, it was in the DA course mostly. So like getting in touch with my body and like identifying my feelings in my body, that was like something which has helped me a lot. The post-traumatic growth course has been tremendous. I'll say that's also like combines somatic work with like seeing what are the things you gain from your traumas, which kind of like helped me out a lot. That was my favorite course. And if I had to choose a tool that I do regularly is the emotional processing tool. So it combines the needs and the stories you tell yourself if you're having a negative emotion. So that can help you manage your emotions in a healthy way.
Oh, wonderful. Um, and then yeah, you mentioned your favorite course was post-traumatic growth. Was that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, that's great. And you touched on how it's important to see what you learned, how you grew. Like if you don't pick out sort of, I guess, the positives in that event, I guess you're always going to see it as nothing but negative and maybe stay in victimhood or stay sort of stuck and not able to move forward. Yeah, that's definitely a powerful course. Thanks for sharing. So I know you're coaching. You've got your IAT certification. Congratulations. Um, so in your coaching practice, what are some common challenges that you're finding people are coming to you with, and how do you help them?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Since like people know that I do IIT coaching, so attachment style is something I come up with. They already have some knowledge of attachment style. So if they have some work to do on their attachment style, they come up with that. There are also people who come up with other issues which are not directly related to attachment style, but still, if we keep going through their situation, then we come across like there could be attachment style contributing to it. Like different things at times, like relationship challenges are there, and there are people who come for addiction issues, or if there's workplace stress. These things definitely help, and there are like things from the IIT training which I learned that can kind of like help me even with other issues, like for example addiction. So there's a habit breaking exercise for it, so that definitely like helps me a lot. And I also use tools from what I learned in my psychology class. So tools from CBT, acceptance and commitment therapy at times. So I combine those at times as well. But IIT tools, definitely one thing I found was they go much deeper as
Sure, sure.
compared to some other tools.
Right, right. Okay. So I was curious, are there any additional things that you learned in the integrated attachment theory training which you didn't learn in school while studying psychology?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say one of the things what I didn't learn in my psychology course is the part where we talk about needs. A lot of the things just focus on like maybe changing the stories or providing a different perspective to the client, that stuff, or just teaching them like how to accept things. But a lot of it is just focused on some of the surface stuff, and some of the things like don't like really go deep into things. So there's also like the needs thing which need to be integrated along with like changing perspective. We have to teach about needs. The boundaries work wasn't taught a lot in psychology. A bit was touched up on it, but like how do you communicate? How do you set boundaries? Those skills weren't like actually taught in our psychology course.
Hmm.
And even in IIT course, we learned like how to set up your own business. That was something like Thais taught us. Like in the last week of IIT, that was sort of very interesting. And she also talks about like how do you deal with clients and all of that stuff in more detail. And some of the points were sort of like interesting, which I didn't quite learn from my psychology teachers.
For sure. And especially like things like setting boundaries, like that should be taught in elementary school, you know? Like these are things that some families, their parents didn't sort of allow children to have boundaries. So of course when they go into adult life, they don't know how to, and it's so scary and foreign that when they try to go to do it, it probably doesn't come out, really well. Like I'm sure you've come across people who set boundaries and it seems so natural and right on the spot. But I
Mhm.
know for myself, I wasn't encouraged to sort of have my own boundaries. So it would always be, somebody would say something that really bothered me. And in the moment, I would just not say anything. I'd kind of freeze. And then I might go home after and, think about all the things I wanted to say, like, how dare you say that, um,
Mhm.
and just think of all the things I should have said. But in the moment, I was just too kind of caught off guard. And didn't notice sort of how to properly set it. So that's why it's important, just these basic skills of like learning how to set a boundary and practicing it beforehand. So then when it happens, you can just, very assertively and respectfully set the boundary. And most people are pretty okay with when you set a boundary with them. Um, yeah.
Yeah. There's
So,
also like I've seen like in Eastern cultures more like mine. I think like there is this belief like children shouldn't have boundaries and all of that stuff, which I don't agree with at all.
hmm,
I believe like we should teach like especially young people to have boundaries and like state what their needs are. Their parents should be more willing to listen to them and not react defensively.
for sure.
Like that's what the thing should be all about because setting boundaries is like very important skill that a lot of us didn't get a healthy modeling of growing up.
Yeah, definitely. You said culturally, like boundaries weren't really encouraged. And just for our audience, where are you located? I know you're far away from me.
Yeah, I'm actually located in India, so like in the younger generation, we are saying like we are now getting more influenced by the Western culture where
Right,
people are slowly like practicing like healthy parenting and like taking child's needs into consideration. But before that, it was not like that. It's like the parent has to be respected. Whatever the parent says is right.
right,
Like the children can't think for themselves correctly. That was the belief. Even our one of our psychology teachers while teaching us said like in Indian cultures usually at times they see assertiveness as rudeness, which shouldn't be the case at all, and that should really be changed.
right. Okay. You're leading the way. Um, and okay, and I know the time there is late for you. And as I mentioned on the top of the podcast, you probably show up a lot of our webinars in like really late hours, odd hours, but you're always like so attentive. I don't think I've ever seen you yawn before. So yeah, it's really inspiring how much you put into sort of your own healing. Okay, so I just want to know, like, as a former DA who's done a lot of work on your attachment style, obviously, what sort of message of hope or inspiration, if there's somebody out there who's on the avoidant side of things, um, and they're, nervous, intimidated, because we all know for DAs it could be a little scary and going into this work is uncomfortable, the avoidance of feelings and emotions and whatnot. But what sort of message of inspiration could you give to somebody who might be a little nervous to take up this type of work?
I would say like just go for it. Usually for DAs, it can at times be challenging because they might just think like, okay, will this work? They might have some learned helplessness around healing, like, will this become better or not? Of those things. So just realize like after healing, your life is going to change for the better and it's definitely going to be like really good. Like being in emotional repression doesn't help, and when you come out of it, it may seem like a little bit scary, but it's definitely worth it. And definitely, when you do the exposure work around vulnerability and you learn to connect to people like in a proper way with healthy interdependence, you're
Hmm.
going to feel more fulfilled in life. And another thing like these often think, which I just remembered, is like I think like at times they might lose out on some of the good qualities they have, like having this analytical mind or that drive for learning and being career oriented, being very intellectual. So the thing is, you're not going to lose out on your positive traits. I believe all attachment style have different positive traits, and even that's the beauty of being an unsecure because even when you become an unsecure, you carry the positive traits of your attachment style along with you.
That's beautiful. And I think we touched on that in a previous podcast, and we mentioned you don't lose your superpowers, your
Mm.
insecure attachment superpowers. They don't go away. So yeah, don't worry about losing sort of all the things that you really love and appreciate about yourself that have, gotten you probably to a really far level in career or different areas of life. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's important to note. Um, are there any for your own life and your daily life, are there any sort of rituals or non-negotiables that you do on a daily basis that sort of keep you in a good place?
I would say, like, firstly, I would use the word standards instead of non-negotiables because I keep sort of like standards. I'm not very rigid with it. Like I have to do it 100% perfectly, and it's a non-negotiable. So I have certain standards in place which I do regularly. So journaling is one of them as something I use a lot, and I at times use the emotional processing tool depending on where I'm at and all of that stuff. And apart from that, the guided processes are really helpful, I would say. Doing guided processes regularly,
Hmm.
that also kind of like helps. And then practicing communication.
Wow.
I've like learned a lot of things, like learning to be like more vulnerable, especially from your socials as well. I used to remember like when I was doing your socials for the first time. So after like meeting people, I used to have those vulnerability hangovers. But after that, I used to also get this dopamine rush, like, okay, I did it. I did something I was afraid of, which was sort of like really interesting. So for that, your socials actually like really helped me out in the school, I would say.
Oh, that's so good to hear. Yeah, it's funny you never know these things because I saw you come to these things for years and you always spoke up and you're always one of the first to put your hands up. So I never would have thought, in the beginning that was tough for you. But I'm happy you kept coming and sort of overcame that and now you're talking up a storm. Okay, so as we're coming towards the end of the interview, I just wanted to ask, like, do you have a tool or a strategy or something that you could help our audience with, whether it be in their own lives or to improve their relationship?
I would say there are like a lot of tools which I go through with the IT clients and all that stuff, but I'll say like one small simple thing. I would say people should like monitor the self-talk. So be careful of how you talk to yourself each day. Like notice when you start self-blaming or labeling yourself negatively, monitor that and like gradually change that habit.
Right,
Because I've seen one of the common themes with most of my clients is like self-blame. That is one of the biggest things I have found. And
right.
it's important to actually be aware of how you would talk to yourself. And Thais uses this tool where you have, after if you have a negative thought or you speak to yourself in an unkind way, you say something like cancel, cancel, and then you change that thought. That's also something we learned in NLP, and that is something which is very powerful. So that's like a small tip I'll give to my audience.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I remember hearing the stat, we have something like 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them can be very negatively oriented. So if you can imagine, it's like somebody following you around, sitting on your shoulder every day, just saying like negative things about you, like that's gonna take its toll. Um, and then the other statistic I heard was that up to 90% of the thoughts we have today were the same ones we had yesterday. So if we're not aware of these thought patterns, we're literally having the same thought patterns every day. We're bringing them over to the next day, to the next day, and they just keep hardwiring. So I love that tool that you gave about cancel, cancel, because the only way to change these sort of thoughts and neural pathways is to like stop it in its tracks and then add sort of a new, more, beneficial thought towards yourself. And obviously, you have to do that over and over because if you've been thinking that way for a long, long time, it'll take a little bit. But the amazing starting point is catching it and being aware of the thoughts. So that's great. Thanks for sharing that. And okay, so what services are you offering these days, Sanjana?
So I'm offering the services related to IT. So changing your attachment style is something I also deal with other issues like workplace stress or self-esteem issues and addictions. So these are the areas I work with. So that's something that I'm currently providing.
Perfect. And how can people get in touch with you?
Okay, so my email ID is sanjanakumar.info@gmail.com. So that's sanjanakumar.info@gmail.com. And there's a link to my website which you can add to your descriptions. I'll provide that.
So is there anything else you wanted to share with our audience before we leave, Sanjana?
It was great talking to you, and I think that's pretty much it. And thank you, Mike, for doing this.
Of course. No, it was my pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Bye now.